On tonight's episode, we'll talk about fantasy managers who disappear for stretches of the season. What is ethically acceptable and what is not acceptable? What should your commissioner do about it and when? We'll also discuss several infielders and see who'd you rather have for the rest of the season. A jam-packed episode of Beat the Shift coming up next. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me, as always, is Ruben Guy. What's going on, Ruben?
I'm doing very great. How you doing today?
Doing pretty good. It's been so rainy in New York. It feels like Florida here. Haven't played ball in a week. A little bit of rest, a little bit of recuperation, and heading towards a stretch in fantasy. What about you?
Yeah, it's my softball games have been rained out. Although we won our first playoff game of series of 3, so that's good. But I mean, the second game got rained out, and we'll see how the field looks. And it's a big headache here. But listen, the Yankees are playing through the rain. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it.
Yeah, it is what it is. I played a pickup game today on a all grass field. We made a field because there's no fields here that are even the least bit dry, and we just played a little game just to get some exercise and stuff, and to keep with it. But we'll hopefully play on Sunday. All right, well, we've got a great guest today and a great episode. Want to welcome Pierre Camus. You've been on the show a bunch of times. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me as always, and I'm honored to be on an episode where apparently I'm ready to be completely called out for the leagues that we're in. Trust me, there are some leagues that we're not in together where I am still competitive. I promise.
And welcome to the dog in the background. How you doing, dog? What's his name?
It's a constant. They wait until I go and record and stream for any show, and that's when they have to bark. So
I'm sure they're good fantasy players in their own right. But
Yep.
what Pierre is referring to is it's called our Fantasy Disappearance episode. We're going to talk about owners who might have disappeared because, frankly, they stink and they're losing their league. And if you're just doing so badly, you give up in the middle. Now, I'm not saying Pierre gave up in his league, although one of the leagues that we're in together in the NFBC, we're currently in third. Pierre is, let's just say he's not doing too good. And we'll talk a little bit about ethics of what to do in this situation, what is right. Now, obviously, if you're in last place and, it's clear you're not going to win, and teams, clear, even if you're in 10th place, clear you have no shot, obviously you wouldn't want to spend so much time on playing because, you have other leagues that are more important, you have other things in your life that are more important. But the question is ethics, because some of the roto categories, or if you're in a head-to-head league, you're playing against opponents, it's sort of dependent upon the other owners to be somewhat competitive, right? To keep the balance in the league. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all. So let's just throw it out to you very generally, Pierre. And do you think it is ethical for owners not to play out the full fantasy baseball season in the final month and a half? Just what's your general take on what's ethical and what's not?
Well, the easy answer to that is that there is no answer because it really depends. Everyone's opinion of ethics, there wouldn't be a question to debate if they were clear. Because, first of all, I'll say this as somebody who not everybody who plays fantasy baseball plays fantasy football. I know that's the last thing that the baseball-only crowd wants to hear. Is like, well, football season, that's not an excuse. You should just stick with baseball. And I get it, but it is something that, as the season winds down for baseball, that's when football's picking up or just starting. And, of course, the beginning of any season, that's the most exciting time. That's when you're drafting, and that's when you're really getting into it. So if you're not in contention, it's easy to just, kind of check it less often or maybe disappear completely. So, I can say I'm guilty of that because I spend a lot of time on fantasy football as well. I do try at the very least to set my lineups. So, nobody wants a dead team, right? And it feels kind of shallow if you're in let's say a head-to-head league and you're playing a team that half of their lineup is on the injured list. And, and it's frustrating if you're trying to compete in the standings, and your closest opponent gets to play that team that basically has a dead team, and they get an easy win. So I understand all that. I do think you should, at the very least, set an active lineup on a regular basis. But look, we're all human. We all have things going on. Fantasy baseball isn't the number one priority for everybody, like it might be for us. So I also wouldn't blame somebody, if they just are dead last and they're out of it. And like, what's their motivation, And even if it's a money league, if they paid good money, they're not getting that money back. I mean, that's their choice. So, I you don't like to see it, but I understand it.
Ruvain, is there a difference between the money leagues against players you don't know? We're talking like NFBC and other online RT Sports and other online contests versus home leagues that you're sort of playing the same guys over and over again, and versus expert leagues, same kind of thing.
Well, you're talking three completely different things, actually. When you're talking about money leagues, if someone's in a money league, usually they're in a bunch of money leagues, not just one or two. So, they're going to be concentrating on the leagues that are doing better. And ethically, if you ever see the movie Billy Madison, well, you see the thing about ethics. And, ethics is it's very touchy because ethically, yes, you should be playing every team all the way through the end of the season, no matter what. But sometimes, like you mentioned at the top of the show, there are priorities. When it comes to money leagues are usually the priorities. But if you're not doing well in the money league and you're at this point where you're not going to get, and you're not going to cash, you're not going to finish in the top whatever, then you can't. I don't see a reason not to do certain transactions just because it may, it's just known that people just don't do transactions when it gets to that point. So ethically, it's wrong, but it's done under the table. People just, whatever. And when it comes to home leagues, a lot of this, if you want to compare it to fantasy football, if someone comes in last place in fantasy football league, usually there's a punishment. Home leagues, usually there is some incentive not to come in last place. So you're going to hopefully, keep trying and keep playing and everything like that. And when it comes to, professionals who do this for a living and who put out projections and everything like that, there's no reason why you shouldn't keep going because your how do I say this? Your ability to project for next year actually can play a lot into how people think of how you do this year. So you have to be very careful which leagues you decide to not watch anymore and which leagues you do decide to watch more.
Yeah. I think that ethics, the whole there's right and wrong, and then there's ethics. If a lot of teams don't even play the whole season. They just conk out after a month or whatever, and they don't play. It happens. I don't think there's an ethical issue with it. I think that if people want to do that, that's fine. What I don't think is ethically correct is if they don't play for a whole season and all of a sudden, with a month to go, they decide to make some pickups and decide to make some moves. If you're not playing the whole season, you shouldn't be playing in that last month. Right? I think that changing that in the end is something else. Obviously, if you were in a hospital or whatever and there's a good reason for it, that's something else. But just changing the not playing to then, oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Or making a trade. If you're in last place, you shouldn't be, and you haven't done anything, you shouldn't be making trades, right? You're either in it or you're out. We understand that if you don't want to compete, okay, that happens. But then don't alter the thing. I mean, do you think, Pierre, that at a minimum you should, even if we know you're busy, you should at least attempt to set your lineup correctly? Also make some minimal, I mean, I don't think you have to go crazy on the waiver wire, but if you have an injured player for the season, I think you're behooving to drop him and pick up an actual playing player, right? Do you think that that's something that teams should do no matter what?
Well, I think it really depends on the league type because, like I said, in head-to-head leagues, those dead teams represent a big advantage for whoever their opponent is on a weekly basis. And, if you're in a smaller league, let's say that it does skew things more. But if you're in, one of these cash leagues, if you're in a 15 team like NFBC league, a tournament, some sort of a competition, I mean, everyone else is probably glad to see that dead team because it just gives them a leg up. It doesn't really, skew it in favor of one team or another. Your team just floats, sinks slowly to the bottom, I should say, and it allows everyone to float up at the top of them. But it's easier to do that if it is, some sort of an online tournament or something where it's not a home league, somewhere where you don't know your teammates, you're not going to be in the same league with those people next year. Doesn't matter, right? They don't have to say, well, we don't want you in our league next year. Home leagues, that's why they have those punishments or some sort of incentive not to finish last, because you don't want somebody to continually do that. But I will say what you said is very, very, very critical thing. I see a lot of people get more upset by those last place teams being more active toward the end of the season, because if a team is clearly out of it, anytime even just past, let's say, the second half of the season, and they make a trade with anybody near the top, all of a sudden everybody's going crazy. All the alarm bells go off, say, it's this is favoritism, this is collusion. It's like, even if the trade is fair, somebody will try to call it off because they don't want that first place team or that second place team getting the edge, right? And so it's like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, in that sense, right? And if you pick up a player and you dump in all your fab to get that player, you're preventing the actual competing teams from getting that player. It's like, well, so what do? You're just supposed to be active or you're not supposed to be active. So it's really a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I don't like it where a team changes its mind on the dime. Now, trading is something else. I mean, my proponent of trading is that I don't think that teams that are clearly out of it and have 0% chance to win should be trading at all. Because when you're trading, it's about probabilities, right? You trade because you want to increase your probability of winning. If you're 2 months to go and you're in last place and you're trading with a team in first place, your probability of winning goes from 0 to 0. The probability of the other team goes from, 20 to 25 or whatever it is. They're gaining a little bit, which is what they want to do in a trade. But your probability is staying at 0. And to me, if there's not a reasonable gain on your end, you shouldn't be doing it. I mean, when I was commissioner of leagues, I wouldn't let teams after a certain date, maybe the All-Star break, trade. If you're in the bottom third, you couldn't trade with the top third. Right? You just can't mix probabilities like that.
And you know what? In our GDD league that we're in together, I was looking for a relief pitcher. I didn't even look at the bottom three teams, because if you're in first, second, or third and you want to make a trade and you're looking at the bottom teams, you don't want that C word to come up, the collusion word, because why would a last place or a second to last or a third last even have the incentive, especially if they're not managing the team at all? All of a sudden they'll make a trade to the first place team or second place team. There's always something that's a little bit off with that. It doesn't sound 100% right. And, so I didn't even bother even looking at the bottom three teams. Even if they had the players that fit and I had the players that fit them, there's no reason to do that, because you're just getting, people are going to start talking, and you don't want that.
Yeah, we only Derek Carty and I, we didn't actually make a trade, but we tried trading only with teams in first, second, and fourth and fifth place. That's it. We weren't looking at the bottom teams, because I think there's something wrong with that. I think there's something unethical. I know people disagree and say, well, you're in last place, but it's fair to make a trade because you want to gain as many points as you can. I don't think so. If you're in a league where the top three pay out and it's a redraft league and there's no way you can actually do it, I actually don't think so. And we've had this discussion before, but that's something else. But yeah, it really does bother me for these players who have done nothing all season and then decide with 3 weeks to go, let's spend all of our fab right now. You sort of, when you're not playing, right? If you decide I'm not going to compete all year, if you're then deciding I'm going to now take a player out of the player pool, you're obviously hurting a specific team or a specific two teams. I don't think that's right. I think that's unethical. So the point I'm trying to make is the ethics of disappearing is murky, but the reappearance, that's the ethical issue. Is that fair, Pierre?
Well, that would be really a peculiar case. If you don't manage your team all season or you're not active and all of a sudden you show up in like September, that would be kind of odd. So yeah, that's funky. But
I've seen it.
You've seen it? Well, that's when, if you're the commissioner, you have to step in and say, oh, well, what's the deal? I mean, why? I don't even understand why anybody would do that. But I will say, as far as the trade thing and the upper third and the bottom third, if that's something everybody agrees on, it needs to be spelled out before the season. It needs to be in the rules, the rule book, whatever is agreed upon. Because if not, we don't have to like it, but you can't say, well, you can't do this. And I'll just say flat out, for me, as far as fantasy, any sport, and if I'm the commissioner, I don't like vetoes. The veto thing is just no, because people abuse it, people misunderstand it. They'll veto trades that are completely fair and even if there's, teams that are maybe not their, first, second, third place, but not dead last. People will veto trades just because they don't like the idea that other teams are helping each other out. And that's not what it's for. It should only be if it's clearly collusion, or if it's just so lopsided that, it's absurd. But for the most part, I think even if we don't agree with the ethics of a certain situation, if it's within the boundaries of the rules, you don't have to like it, but you just kind of have to deal with it.
But you can also modify the rules. Like let's say, for example, I'm in my TGFBI league. I'm in 11th place. If you doubled my points, I still wouldn't have the same amount of points as the third place team. My entire bench is hurt, but I still want to put out a lineup. I still play the waiver wire, but I'm putting in bids for these players at lower amounts. If they fall down to me, I'll take them, but I still want to field just at least a team because I don't want to just give up completely. So there's an ethical way, I guess, of doing this. If you're in the bottom team, you can let the top players go after the players that you want, but you can also put lower bids. And if a player on the waiver wire falls to you because you put in a lower bid and the other player didn't think to put him in, I mean, that's just the luck of the draw, I think.
That's an interesting point, Ruve. You mentioned commissioner, and I want to dig a little bit more into what a commissioner's responsibility or what we should do in the case of a disappearing fantasy player. So in the NFBC, you don't really have a commissioner. Everyone is in it because it's about the money. I think there's a little bit less regulation because, people are there. It's understood that we know people are dropping out. People have 20 teams, some of them. We know that they're going to drop out of effort of some of them. You don't really get the ethics. There's no trading allowed, right? You don't get the ethics of teams disappearing, reappearing. You don't really get that. It's just they disappear and forevermore. In an expert league, I think it's really up to the organizers that you may not be invited back. I don't think there's much to do during the season. You're supposed to... as someone who's in an expert league, if you're an expert, it's really your obligation to do that. I don't know that there's anything to do during the season. You should know better, but it could threaten being invited back. But in a regular standard home league, my question to you, Pierre, is, A, should players or the commissioner at some point in the season ping the owner and say, hey, maybe can you play? Maybe can you do something? Can you do the minimal? Hey, buddy, can you set your lineups? Hey, you've got some hurt players. Can you make some fab pickups? Is that something that players or commissioners should do at some point if they see that a team is not doing anything for a month or so?
I think that's exactly right. In fact, I used to be for a while in a league where that was, in fact, the rule that the commissioner said 30 days. If I don't see that you've made any moves, you're getting, put on notice. And if you don't respond, that week or make a move at the very least, some sort of roster move, that's it. You're out. And what we would do actually is have a little like a dispersal draft. That team would just be dead, and then those players would all go to the waiver wire, and then we just carry on. So that was the threat of, look, you have to at least stay active if you want to stay in this league, and if that happens, you're not invited back next year. And it worked pretty well. And I think that 30 days is unless there's something life-altering that happens, there's no excuse for not doing something within a month. Again, it does not take that long to set a lineup. I mean, really, even if you just put a guy in the IL, pick up a player, you don't have to be invested fully just to do that bare minimum. So yeah, I think the commissioner, as part of that responsibility, absolutely should at the very least ping the owner and see what's happening.
Yeah. I've gone away on vacation and I didn't make a move for a week. That's understandable. It's also understandable if you tell the league, hey, I'm out for 2 months. I'm sorry, I'm out for 2 months. I'm out for 2 weeks. Just so you know, I don't have access to computer. We understand if that happens, but a month is probably a good way. Ruvain, my question to you is, towards the end of the season, especially some leagues have innings pitched minimums, I should say, where, if you don't have the innings pitched minimum, all your stats go to zero, and that could affect the standings. Should the commissioner step in on a dead team and actually set the lineups and actually make minimal pickups just to get those innings minimum or the like?
Well, I think the way to go about it is this. If you're going into middle of August, end of September, and you're looking at a team's roster and you see they're not making any pickups, and you see they're not going to hit the minimum, and it's going to affect the whole league because all of a sudden all the team above them get a point, every team below them get the, it screws up the whole, it's so, that's where it comes in where it's ethical, where it's not ethical if it matters for the rest of the league if you're not going to play. If you're not going to play, it's going to be an issue. So what I would do is, when I was commissioner, I actually sent out an email blast to everyone in the league saying, this is what's happening. These teams are on the cusp of not making the minimums. What should we do? Should I start making roster changes? And I don't think the commissioner should just do it on his own. I think he has to have the league behind him in order to do it, and just a little roster change just to make sure they have an active roster. I think that's the best way to go about it. I don't think a commissioner should just do it without asking the rest of the teams in the league, because I think that's completely wrong. But as long as all the other teams in the league are okay with it, within a certain context, within a certain amount of moves, and that's it, then I think the commissioner should do something about it. Otherwise, it'll screw up their standings.
Pierre, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with that because, I mean, okay, it's always the easy answer is it always depends on the circumstances. It's easy to say we should, tell the owner this or that. Every league has its own peculiarities. I mean, if it's a home league, if it's family members, if it's, industry experts, whatever kind of league it is, you have to treat it differently. You have to really approach it based on who the people are and what the situation is. So there is really no one size fits all solution to this, which is what makes it so interesting. So again, I'm never gonna just say, you have to be active every single week. There's no excuse not checking in September. I mean, it happens. Look, I've done it too. I'm guilty of it. So I understand that there's some sort of a responsibility to be mostly active, but at the same time, we don't need to harp on somebody for, being out of it if they know they have nothing really to gain from it. If it doesn't severely skew the results, the outcomes of a league, like a lopsided trade or something, I think just carry on and let's not worry too much about these dead teams.
Ruven, in terms of fab, of course, you do need to scan for dead teams, and you might have to alter some of your strategy. Do you have any suggestions how to alter fab strategy down the stretch to account for dead or disappearing owners?
Yeah, you have to take a look at the amount of people left in the league who are still active and how much money they have left in fab, and if they're still active. It depends on how much each bid was at the highest each week and who's still active, and you can base your bids based on that. Meaning, if the last place team is not that active and they have the most money, you don't really have to be overly concerned with them jumping in out of nowhere. Hopefully, jumping in out of nowhere and stealing somebody from you. You may be worried about a guy who's close to you in fab, so you may want to look at just the last couple of weeks and see who paid the most amount of money for a certain player, and that's it. But I think it's a matter of looking at the total amounts that each person has for fab and utilizing the last couple of weeks as a guideline to show what the most fab you should be spending on players.
Pierre, anything else to add to the discussion about pickups down the stretch or in general about the fantasy disappearance?
Well, I mean, following up on what Ruven just said, it's very smart because really the teams that pull away at the end, it's usually there's a dogfight between the top couple of teams. Managing that fab for those late pickups, those last couple of streamers who get you over the top, being able to recover from those late season injuries. It's the teams that manage their fab wisely. They don't spend it all in the first month, and then you can see based on who am I really bidding against. Just because it's a 15-team league doesn't mean you're bidding against 14 other guys. You might only have a few that are actually active in bidding. See who's been active, see how much they have left. That's a great idea because a lot of times that can make the difference is that final push. Bidding wisely.
All right, and if you, the listener, have any comments or anything to add to the discussion, please hit us up on Twitter, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, we've got a segment today as we get down the stretch called Who'd You Rather, and we're going to go through a couple of, Who'd You Rather between a couple of different players down the stretch. Today we're going to cover the infield. So I'm going to start you off, and we'll give Pierre the first crack at this. At first base, rest of the season, who'd you rather? Paul Goldschmidt, Alec Boehm, or Vinny Pasquantino?
Well, I'm going to have to go with Vinny because, it's tempting to just say this is the guy who's been the hottest in the second half so far. But really, he's been a consistent run producer all season. I hate to take a single season and think that it's become a trend, but I remember very distinctly Alec Boehm last year having a very strong first couple of months, coming really hot out the gate, and then kind of flatlining and just being okay second half. And he's not exactly doing that so far, but his second half has not quite matched his first half. And with Pascatino, it's the opposite. I mean, he's catching fire. That Royals lineup is scoring runs still. I mean, I guess we have to stop being surprised. So I'm going to go with Vinny. Look, Goldschmidt, I think the signs are there. We already know his best years are over, but it's like we keep waiting for something to turn around, some sign. And I think at this point we have to stop waiting and hoping for better.
Goldschmidt does have the most homers to date with 17 of the bunch, actually tied with Vinny Pasquantino for 17. But Ruvain, who would you take?
Well, I agree with Paul Goldschmidt. I think he's number 3 when it comes to making a list. I was thinking about Vinny Pasquantino also because over the last 20 games he's batting .372 with 6 homers, but I don't think that's really sustainable for the rest of the season. I think he'll be very good the rest of the season, but I'm going to go with Alec Boehm. He's had a better average so far the second half of the season. I'm going my second half. If you go to Fangraphs and then you go to the splits, there's a split for the first half and second half. That's what I'm going to be using. And basically, Boehm has had the better average so far second half, less power. But 2 of the last 3 seasons, his second half has been better than his first half. So going on track record, going on the fact that he's got they both have good lineups, Boehm and Pasquantino. But I'm going to go with Boehm the rest of the year because he's playing in Philly, and I like playing in that bandbox there. So I'm going to go with Boehm over Pasquantino, but just by a hair.
Yeah, so the ATC projections rest of season, which by the way has just been updated on Fangraphs, actually has Boehm with a $19 projection, Goldschmidt with 18, and Pasquantino at 14. I don't actually believe that. I do agree with you guys that Goldschmidt is third. Goldschmidt has a 28% strikeout rate. That's one of the highest he's ever had, other than maybe the first year of his career, but he's just on the wrong track. He's got the old man skills. He still has a little bit of remnants of power, but that's it. Vinny Pasquantino, 13% strikeout rate. Boehm, pretty good also, 14%. These are very good contact hitters. Both have a 7% walk rate. To date, both have earned $22 on the roto scale. Both are really, really equivalent from each other. Boehm had a little bit of the average, although he's not a 300 hitter, but 280, 285, yeah. Vinny Pasquantino, 270, he can keep that up. Both are going to hit plenty of RBI choices. To me, it's actually a coin flip between Boehm and Pasquantino. I do like the park. I do like Boehm. I do like that lineup. So I think from an RBI standpoint, maybe Boehm going forward, although to date, Pasquantino, 84 RBIs. To me, it's really a coin flip. I wish I wouldn't have to even pick between them. I'd say Boehm just a little bit because of the park and the team and the stuff, but it's so damn close. You really can't go with them. And maybe I should go with Vinny. Vinny's been on the show here. We had Pasquantino for our 100th episode. But I'll go by Boehm by the width of dental floss, put it that way. Second base. Here are the choices. Pierre will go with you first, but here are the choices. 4 guys. Who would you rather between Jonathan India, Bryson Stott, Ryan McMahon, Luis Arraez?
This is a far less appealing group than the first base punch.
Oh yeah, we went down a notch here.
All right, I'm gonna work backwards, and I'll say I have to put India last. I mean, it looks like he'll still be playing pretty much every day, but it's for the team that, as far as I know, has been the worst offense in the National League in the second half thus far. He hasn't really, had a hot streak for a long time now. I don't know. India just doesn't seem appealing enough for me. I'd like to say Stott because of his spot in the Phillies lineup, but he stopped hitting after, what was it, May? I think his batting average has gone way down, and now he's not even stealing bases anymore. So he's firmly hit some sort of a wall for some reason or another. And then I think Arraez, just to me, has lost a lot of his appeal. He's a guy who, I mean, we're looking at what he's done over the course of this season, and we know what he's there for, batting average. 3 home runs, 4 stolen bases. And that's like a very shallow fantasy profile. He has to be leading the league in batting average, by a good margin, which he has, but he's not doing that this year. I mean, he's still up there with a 3.03 average, but that's not a significant enough advantage to offset what he doesn't do. So I guess I'm going with Ryan McMahon because at least I feel like he has that power upside. He's in a good hitting environment, obviously, but I know he's been struggling lately, but at least I feel like he could turn it around and maybe he'll show something like what he showed in April.
Yeah, we're talking about players who are projected for a low double digit. Actually, according to ATC rest of season, Jonathan India is projected the highest at $14. Stott at 12, McMahon at 11, Luis Arias at 11. To date, just letting you know, Stott has been number one with $13 earned to date. McMahon $12 earned to date. India 11, Arias at 7. Ruvain, who's your choice between the four?
My choice is actually Bryson Stott, and now I'm going to give him my reasons here. Now, India, he's been trending down so far this year, and 2 of the last 3 years, his second half has been worse than his first half. He's also a little bit injury prone. He's healthy right now, which is fine, but take that into account. I'm not trusting him that much. Ryan McMahon, the ball's flying out of Coors right now. I was watching the Met game today at Coors. The ball is flying out of there right now. But he's 4 for his last 48, and his batting average has gone down 60 points in the last 3 months. So he's trending in the wrong directions. And Luis Arias, since he came into MLB in 2019, his first half has always been better than his second half, except for 2020, which doesn't really count because it's only 60 games. So with all that being said, Bryson Stott has been the same player so far in the second half as was the first half. He's not really a first half player according to his history. He's not really a second half player. So I'm going to go with Bryson Stott again because of the stadium, because of that lineup.
So I'm going to say that Luis Arias is in last. India third. Arias, in terms of fantasy play, he's a 300 hitter. We know it. He has been trending downwards, but he's a 300 hitter. He has shown absolutely no power and speed. We're talking a guy who's literally one-dimensional. For Roto, he's just not valuable. He's not making you up anywhere unless you see that, oh, my God, batting average is so tight and I can gain. Sure, but then you can be behind in other categories. I just don't see his fantasy usefulness as much, especially in Roto. Between India, he's been trending downward. Now, he does have a nice base. He's got 9 homers, 10 steals. He is batting almost 260, so he's got some base. Like, if you're in a 10-team league and he's somehow on the waiver wire, like, he's useful, right? He has some kind of marginal value, but he is trending downward as well. Stott, to me, he's now batting lower in the order. He's batting 7th or 8th every day. He's even losing some at-bats. He stopped stealing, as you said, which is true. Obviously, if steals is the bigger issue between any of these players, Stott is your guy. But I do think that Ryan McMahon is the better guy. He's got 16 homers. He's got pretty much pace of what he usually does. He's batting 250. He's got 50 homers, 50 RBIs, 50 runs. He's not too far off from what his usual value is. He looks fairly consistent. The Rockies are hitting. We're still in August. The Rockies are going to power up, as we just saw. That Ruvain said that the balls are flying out of the stadium now. So I think McMahon is probably the most consistent and most reliable down the stretch. So I'd say McMahon by a little bit over Stott, then India, then Arias. Any other comments, guys?
Nope.
I really hope that if you're in a 12-team league, hopefully you have a little bit better option at second base. But yeah, it's interesting that we have a couple of guys there who peaked very, very early. I mean, I think the first 2 weeks of the season, Ryan McMahon was like one of the top fantasy producers, and Bryson Stott was looked like an all-star, immediately. But yeah, I think, look, outside of a points league, Luis Arias has now become basically kind of a fringe option to start at the position.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a 15-team league in NFBC. We're not even playing Arias most of the time, Ruvain.
Nope, and I have him in GDD. I play him whenever I have a fill him just for an injury need, and that's it, because he's really getting nothing else. It's really also a matchup thing, and he has to bat 360, 350, 340 in that range for him to have any value whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, unless we see he has 4 games in a half week versus somebody who has 2, we're not playing him. We're doing really well in average in that league, so he's redundant. He's not useful. Now, we don't want to drop him because he's way above replacement in a 15-team league, and somebody else will scoop him up. So he's a good bench guy to have, but I'd say 3 out of 4 half weeks, we're not even playing him. He's just there. All right, let's move on to the shortstop position, going a little bit higher up in the totem pole. Here's an interesting discussion. Who would you rather? C.J. Abrams, Ezekiel Tovar, Nico Horner, or the rookie Jackson Merrill? Pierre.
Well, this list, my knee-jerk reaction is it's got to be Abrams, right? It's interesting, though, if you look, Jackson Merrill has really closed the gap, in terms of the counting stats. He's up there, and also his batting average is definitely better than Abrams. I'll say this. I'm going to still go with Abrams. I kind of like the fact that I feel like I know that what I see is what I get, because his batting average right now is basically identical to what it's been the last 2 seasons. He's going to run. Washington, last time I checked, was leading the league in stolen base attempts. He's going to continue to run, of course. That's leadoff, which gives him a slight advantage. Merrill usually kind of in the middle of that order. And Washington's kind of picked up the pace. They're getting younger. I hope Dylan Cruz shows up at some point. They're giving guys like James Wood a chance. So I feel like it's a little bit more exciting of an offensive atmosphere than it was. With Abrams, I know he's going to continue to steal bases. Really, the discouraging thing, which I had noticed, because I wound up talking about him specifically last week on one of my videos, is he's been caught stealing a lot more. So he's still really fast and he still runs a lot, but he's not been as efficient as he should be. So that stolen base total should be higher. But look, he still has power. He still can help do it all. I like Tovar as well. But I think Abrams has to be first for me. And I'll just say Nico Horner is going to be last, because all he does is get you some steals, but he hurts you in the power categories. The batting average isn't high enough to offset that. So for me, I'm going to go Abrams, but I feel like Merrill and Tovar are actually both fairly close.
Horner has been a very big disappointment. I had very high hopes for him this year. I thought he was close to a 290 hitter with 35 steals and maybe a little bit more than 4 homers, but he's been a disappointment. He was definitely of the 4 the highest projected value going into the season. He might be at the bottom now. But my question before we go to Ruvain is, are you concerned with Abrams now on Washington? They traded Lane Thomas, and it's a worse situation, and they just could fizzle out in the end, and he'll lose value of that. And also he's hit 17 homers. I mean, that's way above what he should be doing. He's gotten pretty lucky with the homers so far. Do you think that he's just going to regress so much more?
No, I don't see any reason. Well, and one thing I've noticed, and this kind of plays into my thinking of why, like from the previous position, I know Ryan McMahon has been the worst of those second basemen, in the last couple of weeks. But if we're talking from today on, you know how it goes, right? Everything here, baseball's a game of cycles, right? And players are up and down. In the end, it all evens out. We usually find players come pretty close to what your projections are. And obviously Nico Horner is not meeting his, and we're going to discount him. But I feel like Abrams is the one who has the best possible range of outcomes. And if I see a player who's, I think, going to be on the end of one of those downsides, if like you look at Abrams, his last 100 plate appearances, that rolling ex-WOBA is going straight down. He's ice cold. But that means to me, pretty soon it's going to start to come back up toward the middle, right? So if I feel like better days are coming, for example, McMahon, after this slump, he's going to snap out of it, right? Abrams, he's going to start to pick up the pace. I'd rather take a chance on one of those players who has the talent to do it, as opposed to a player who maybe is overachieving a little bit and will regress negatively.
Since July 8th, we're talking about a month, Abrams is batting 155 with 3 homers. He has 6 steals, but he's just been brutal, and you're not going to get a lot of RBI. He has 10 RBIs or so in the last
But if you look at him recently, he's had hits in 8 of the last 11 games. So he looks like he's starting to turn it around again. I know that average looks so bad, and he was doing so poorly for a while. But look at the last 11 games. He's gotten a hit 8 of the last 11 games. So he may be turning around. Nico Horner has 2 home runs since May 12th. He's only stealing, and his average is not that great. So I don't know why you would play him over, let's say, even Jackson Merrill. Jackson Merrill, he's a hot guy right now. He says 3 homers in the last 16 games, is in a good lineup, but I'm going to go with Tovar here. Tovar has 5 homers in the last 17 games, and I looked at the Rockies' schedule. The Rockies have more home games than away games for the rest of the season. So if you want to talk about McMahon about this also, Tovar, they're playing in a hitter's environment. He just to put it into perspective how Ezekiel Tovar plays. The Mets were winning today 9-1 in the bottom of the 9th inning. 2 outs with a runner on, and Tovar was up. That's an at-bat that a lot of players would just give up on. He didn't give up. He got a hit. He got a base hit, and he didn't give that at-bat up. So if you have that type of player on your team, and he's still going for it and gunning for it down so much in the bottom of the 9th inning, I think he's the guy to watch for, especially if they're playing in Colorado, more so than they're not. I'd take him over any of the others.
Yeah, I really like Tovar. And very good point, by the way, which about the Rockies playing more home games, which is actually really, really important to know. The only thing that Tovar has disappointed me so far in the season really has been the steals. Preseason, ATC projected him for 16 homers, 13 steals. Well, he already has 19 homers, so he surpassed that. And but he's not going to hit anywhere near the steals. ATC also projected him just for a 262 average. He's got a 281. I mean, Tovar has exceeded expectations. I'm going to go with Tovar here as well. I'm not a CJ Abrams fan. I was trying to give all the reasons why I don't. Now, ATC does project rest of season Abrams at the top, a $19 projection. I don't buy that. I think he's going to be worse than that. Not terrible. I still take him second right now because the steals are a lock. But overall value, I like Tovar. I think that Horner is the worst of the bunch. I think that expectations preseason, he's either hurt or something. I think he is hurt. I just don't see him doing that. And Jackson Merrill is just a stud. He just does a little bit of everything. I think he's great. I would say it's Tovar, a little bit of a gap. Abrams and Merrill, fairly equivalent, in my opinion. And Horner, a step below that. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I would just say that when we're talking about this, we're talking about this season. We're not talking about next season.
Yes,
because
rest of
when
season.
the projections come out next season, Horner may be on this close to the same level just because people are not going to say, oh, you know what, maybe he was hurt and everything like that. So this is just for rest of season. This is not for next year and beyond. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say also we have to keep team context in mind here for the rest of this season. We now, for the most part, know who is and is not contending. And you mentioned that the Washington, perhaps, that may not be the best place. I think they at least have some hope for their immediate future now that they've shipped off the old veterans and they've got some more young blood in there. So I think that that's at least something that keeps them going. The Cubs, it just feels like I don't know, this whole season just feels like they've been kind of stagnant. Like they're very much underachieving despite not really being out of contention for a wild card. You know what I mean? It's just a different feel. And it just feels like so many of their players are in that same situation as Horner, just disappointing. Dansby Swanson, Cody Bellinger, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Team context is important, and we are talking rest of season. All right, before we go on to the third base position, it's time for the Injury Guru's Trivia of the Week.
So as we're going to talk about the third base position, this is where my trivia question comes into play. Over the last 3 weeks of the season, which is according to Fangraphs, the second half of the season so far, who has hit the most home runs in the majors? Over the last 3 weeks of the season, who has hit the most home runs in the majors? I'm looking for the top 1, 2, 3, 5.
And did you say it was third baseman? You kind of hinted at that. Is that right?
Okay. Well, we're talking about third baseman, so you could probably name one of them just off the bat.
I mean, I know the people that we're going to talk about. It's Jake Berger is one of them, right?
Yes, Jake Berger has had 9 homers over the first part of the second half of the season. But can
Pierre,
you name the others?
Guess the others.
I feel like Eugenio Suarez is like a tricky answer here, but maybe I'm wrong.
No. Not even
Aaron
those
Judge?
players. No, not Aaron Judge.
Pete Alonso?
Nope. Alonso was in a slump for a while.
This is true. Okay.
Let me think it through. What else we got?
Think of recent Fab pickups. Think of the recent Fab wire.
Oh, well, Tyler Fitzgerald has got to be
There
one.
you go. He's had 10. It's in the quote unquote second half so far.
I have both these guys. Anthony Santander has been a beast.
Yes, that is correct.
And
Anthony
another
Santander
guy that
is
I
tied
have
with Fitzgerald.
in GDD, Kettle Marte has been a beast.
Kettle Marte also, that's correct. But could you name the last one? Because Marte, Fitzgerald, and Santander all have 10. Jake Berger and this other player have 9. Who's the other player?
Vlad?
No. Good guess, though, but no.
I'll
give you a hint. He was traded during the trade line. Josh
Bell, yeah.
Josh Bell. He's been going off since he went to Arizona. But the reason why I bring this up is because we're going to talk about the third baseman, and the guy who I think is going to be taking off is Jake Berger. We're going to talk about Cabrian Hayes, comparing him to Isaac Paredes, Jake Berger, and Willie Castro. Now, I'm going with Jake Berger, hands down, no question, not even close to any of the other guys we're talking about. The first half of the season, he really didn't play that great. He had 9 homers. Well, he has 9, like I mentioned, he has 9 homers in the last 19 games, batting .296, but he had 10 homers in his first 73 games. Just think about that. He's almost had doubled his home runs in the last 19 games when compared to the first 73. He had an oblique injury in the first half. He seems to be healthy now, so I think he's a head above the rest when I mention the other players. Brian Hayes, he's not having a great year. Last year he did bat over 300, over 10 home runs in the second half of the year, so there's that to look forward to. But Brian Hayes is getting similar to Luis Ariz. You're not really getting that much production out of him. Isaac Paredes, since he was traded, he's 5 for 33 with 1 home run. So going to the Cubs has not so far been the best for him. And Willie Castro has been better in the second half usually in his career, but his last 16 games, Willie Castro, 1 home run, no stolen bases, and a .215 average. I don't know how you can even still be playing him at this point.
So, Cabrian Hayes, Isaac Paredes, Jake Berger, Willie Castro. What say you, Pierre?
Yeah, I agree. It's got to be Berger. I mean, obviously he's showing the power. There's not often where for a hitter going to Miami is an upgrade, but when your last team was the White Sox, then yes, by default it is. And it's fine. I mean, he's showing that power. Like you said, he's firmly, hitting in third most nights in that lineup, sometimes fourth. I like to be optimistic about Isaac Paredes, but he's not showing much reason. I already talked about this with Horner, like the Cubs. I don't know what it is, just doesn't seem to be in the cards for them this year. Maybe the managerial switch didn't really help things. And you would think going from Tampa to anywhere might be an upgrade for a power hitter. But really, looking at the park factors for a right-handed hitter, Wrigley Field really isn't much better than the Dome, believe it or not, just for a right-handed power hitter. It's not an ideal situation. So he doesn't get an upgrade there. And it doesn't look like he's getting an upgrade in team context, despite the fact that the talent that's in that lineup should be better. So Paredes is going to have to take a second seat here behind Berger. And let's just say with Hayes, look, unless your fantasy league uses fielding percentage or something like that as a stat, he doesn't belong on fantasy rosters. He just doesn't. It's actually kind of insane. You look, that's why he's still out there. He's a good fielder for his position. His batting run value is the first percentile, according to StatCast. I mean, that's the value he brings offensively. And I know what he brings to fantasy teams, which is basically nothing.
Yikes. Yeah. Come back to Hayes in a minute, but the ATC projections have Berger, Willie Castro second, Isaac Paredes third, and Cabrian Hayes. I actually agree with that order. Castro is just very useful because he plays any position. He can pop in anywhere. By the way, statistically, he looks very much like Jonathan India this year. He's got 8 homers, 10 steals, batting .257. India right now has 9 homers, 10 steals, .258. So very, very close to that, but he's more useful positionally. And Hayes is obviously the worst. Out of all the people we've discussed today, he's the only guy that has returned negative value for the year. He's a negative $3 player so far this year. I mean, 3 homers in a fantasy league, Yikes. And he's now batting, early in the season, batting third, batting first, whatever. He's batting like seventh this year for the Pirates in the last couple of days. Brian Hayes, should he be owned he shouldn't be owned in 10-team leagues. Should he be owned in 12-team leagues? Maybe even not. Should he be owned in 15-team leagues? Maybe as a bench guy? Like, how far has he really fallen, do you guys think?
I would rather use that bench spot on, the latest rookie who gets called up, take a shot on him, somebody who could, be a utility player like a Castro who can play multiple positions, if someone gets hurt or takes a day off. There's no upside here, right? I mean, there's really no justifiable reason to put him in your lineup on a daily basis. So, and this is what really scouts were worried about with him, very much glove first. And then when he first stepped on the scene, he flashed some power, but that's not his game. He doesn't really have that power. Now we're seeing what they said.
So who would you rather guys take other than Brian Hayes? Would you rather have, let's see where he ranks here. Would you rather have Heimer Candelario?
Yes. Not Brian.
Yes.
Jose Miranda?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Eugenio Suarez?
Definitely.
Josh Smith of the Rangers?
Yeah. I'm probably just going to blanket say yes to almost every name you put out there if they're active on a roster. But
Matt
yes.
Vierling?
Yes, he has outfield eligibility. Yeah,
What
yes.
about Junior Caminero? Didn't play yet, but would you rather have him?
Absolutely.
On my roster? Yeah.
Colt Keith?
Yeah.
Noelve
Yes.
Marte?
Yes.
How about
Upside.
Yes.
newly called up Kobe Mayo?
Yes.
Yeah.
Upside.
Has he gotten a hit yet? I'm sure he will one
up.
day.
Anthony Rendon?
Okay. All right. Fine. Now you got me. You draw the line here.
Abram Toro Hernandez?
I'd rather have Toro Hernandez. I don't know about Rendon, but I'd rather have Toro Hernandez, I think, because he's playing out there in
Trey
Oakland, so-
Lipscomb? Josh Rojas?
Is he on the active roster?
Justin
Okay.
Henry Malloy. I'm getting into this really negative. All right, so basically in a 15-team league, he's not rosterable anymore if you'd rather take these guys. I mean, these are... Yeah, Brian Hayes is pretty much just unless your entire roster is injury filled in a 15-team league, you're not taking him. You're still taking him in a mono league, obviously, but yeah, Brian Hayes, he's looking really, really bad this year. No faith in anything. ATC projection still has him as an $8 player, but I kind of agree. I think I'd put him more in the just barely on the bench type, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Barely.
Wow. Unbelievable. All right, let's do some waiver wire picks. We're talking about players that you might want to pick up this week. Pierre, why don't you lead us off? Who's a couple players you'd like to pick up?
Well, I know it's easy to dunk on the White Sox these days, so let's do it again.
They did win a game,
that,
though, in the last 28 days. They did win one game, though.
Well, look, we always have to look at the glass, at least one.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt you again, but you know that if the White Sox did not have that 21-game losing streak, if instead they had a 21-game winning streak and they won all those 21 games instead of lost them, they'd still be in last place. That's how awful they are, that you can turn all of that crappy streak into wins, and they'd still be in last place. They are just absolutely putrid this year.
Yeah, everybody likes to see records broken, and I don't have any animosity towards Chicago or the White Sox or anything, but I'm kind of rooting for them to break the futility record just because it's a record, right? It's like history was made this year somehow. But let's go with a former White Sox, one who actually did get dealt, Eloy Jimenez. Thought he might kind of be a platoon player, not sure, but he's been getting pretty much everyday playing time. I don't think today, but he's actually hitting. And, sometimes a change of environment does wonders, especially when you go from a team like that to a team like Baltimore. I will tentatively buy in because we know that he does have that massive power upside. And again, I keep throwing that word out because that's what we're going for at this point. You're looking for somebody who can bring the power, can score runs. So I'm gonna bite. I'm gonna take a chance on him in leagues where he's available.
I actually just cut him, or did I cut him? Or I think I was trying to cut him. No, I didn't cut him. I actually was gonna within the GDD. I was actually gonna cut him this week and pick up somebody else, and we just got outbid by everybody and all the other budget picks. We certainly didn't play him. We should have, but yeah, that's interesting. You said that. I was on the pulse of get rid of him, but he turned it around this week. Eloy, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll last. Like I said, I'm not necessarily looking rest of the season for sure. Not guaranteeing anything here, but he's pretty much available in a lot of leagues because he's been dumped or, people just didn't want to hold on in the first place. I'll always take a chance on the guy who has that upside, who's in a good environment.
All right, Ruven, anyone to add?
Yeah, I got 3 players. Actually, 2 are from the Chicago area. Let's start with a guy from Arizona, Geraldo Perdomo. He's only 12% owned in CBS leagues. In the last 2 weeks, he's batting .325 with a homer and 2 stolen bases, and he's got eligibility at second and short. You put all those things together, and you need a second baseman, and you don't want to play Luis Ariz at second base anymore. This guy will probably give you more counting stats than the other 2. Pete Crow Armstrong, he's 24% owned in CBS. In the last 2 weeks, he's batting .295 with 4 stolen bases. No power, no home runs, but he's playing center field. The Cubs want to see what he has. And if you want a guy for stolen bases, he's the guy to go for. And I'm actually going to mention a White Sox here, Andrew Benintendi. He's 8% owned in CBS. In the last 2 weeks, he's batting .302 with 3 homers and 10 RBIs. That's not too bad. That's not too shabby. If you do need an outfield spot, I mean, he's playing basically every day, and he's available almost everywhere. So if you really need something, the White Sox, they're losing. They're not being shut out every day. They still are scoring, and Andrew Benintendi is the reason for a lot of it right now.
You have a player who batting .300 over the last 3 weeks, and they still can't win a game. I mean,
Nope.
their batting average must be like 100 for the team.
Yep.
Brutal. And they didn't trade him. But yeah, I'll add 3 guys. Jake McCarthy, he's, I think, under-owned. He's only on 20% of the leagues. He's available in some 15-team mixed leagues as well right now. In 250 at-bats this year, he's got 16 stolen bases, and he's batting .293. I mean, if you have Luis Ariz, why is Luis Ariz better than Jake McCarthy? I mean, to date, Luis Ariz has earned $7. McCarthy has earned $5, but Luis Ariz has played a heck of a lot more. And since McCarthy is playing these days, I think McCarthy is better than Ariz in a lot of ways because he's a 2-dimensional guy instead of a 1-dimensional guy, and Arizona's doing well. So I think McCarthy is interesting. Orlando Arcia, he's under-owned at 20%. 11 homers so far this year. He's batting just .227, but that is BABIP-driven. He looks to be close to the same player as last year. I think Arcia is a good player that will pick up in the towards the end of the season. And one more, Ernie Clement, Toronto, is getting more playing time with some of the guys traded. He qualifies at third, qualifies at short. Batting .271 on the year with 6 homers, 8 steals, and just .250 at-bats. That's like a 15-15 pace or close to it with a good average. That's interesting to me. So if you're looking at a guy to fill in and who's multi-eligible, Ernie Clement could be your guy. Anybody else, Pierre, to add?
I think that's a good list. And we're sticking with hitters. I know it's easy to just ignore those veterans who have really not done much, but look, I like to stream when a guy's hot. I take advantage while I can. Talked about Eugenio Suarez, who had kind of just given up on, thought he might even be left for dead by the D-backs, and then all of a sudden he was the hottest hitter of the past month. And now Jock Peterson is getting hot again. He's somebody that you could pick up because he's typically streamed, not just constantly started, but also Michael Conforto apparently is back from the dead. So I'll give him a shot for a week or so while he's swinging a hot bat.
All right, let's go to the pitcher preview. That's where we look at some good starts this week, maybe 2-star pitchers, future 2-star pitchers, or whatever. Pierre, we'll start with you. Who's the pitcher you'd like to pick up this week?
All right, well, again, not very exciting when you hear Paul Blackburn, but it looks like he might be tapped to face Oakland and Miami this week. So that has my attention. And if nothing else, he's a player that, when he's out there, he can usually eat up some innings. He typically does not get lit up, and I feel confident he won't get lit up by Oakland or Miami. He's still pretty freely available as far as I know. So that's somebody who, just based on schedule, definitely jumps to mind. And then on the other extreme end, I know he hasn't looked as good lately, nearly as good, but Tyler Phillips, the rookie, he gets the benefit of also pitching against Miami, and then I believe he gets Washington next. So I still think there's enough talent in there in these weaker matchups. He should bounce back. We know how rookie pitchers are. It's up or down, not much in between. So again, he was way up to start, very down the last two starts. So I'm feeling that he might be back on the upswing this week.
I bet you that Ruvain had Paul Blackburn on his list. I mean, he's a Met, and he's looked great so far. Yeah.
Yes,
12 innings, the last two starts with the Mets, 12 innings, 12 strikeouts, just 2 earned runs. The Mets, people are saying the Mets, they should have traded. They were in on Blake Snell. Maybe let's trade. You have a guy who's throwing, 6 innings a game, 6 strikeouts, just allowing 1 run a game, and now he's going to face Oakland, Miami. I don't know. I think the value they'd have to trade to get Snell. How much better are you going to get than Paul Blackburn so far? He's the 5th starter, but he's better than a 5th starter. I mean, this is a golden matchup for a golden set of matchups for him. It's an obvious streaming option, and good for the Mets. I think they did it good at the deadline.
Yeah, and I'm going to add on to that. If you look at Paul Blackburn's ERA, it got inflated right before he got hurt, and he was probably playing hurt for a little while. And then once he's been back, he's been pitching about 5-6 innings. He's pitching between 75 and 85 pitches a game right now. But when you're playing the weaker competitions, and both of those games are at Citi Field, they're not on the road. So put that together, I think that's great. And even his teammate, I think, David Peterson, he's 1 start at home against Oakland also. He's gone at least 5 to 6 innings in his last 5 starts, including today. We only gave up 1 run in Colorado in 5 innings. He does walk a lot of people. He has if you ever have him on your roster and you're watching him play and watching him pitch, he always gets into trouble in the 4th or 5th inning, gives up, he loses concentration, whatever it may be, and you hoping gets to the 5th inning because usually the Mets are winning. I think the Mets are 9-3 during his starts for this year. So if you want to try to get a win, he's the guy to go for. And plus, he has 2 starts the following week. I don't know if you'd want to play him because he's playing at home against Baltimore and at San Diego. So I don't know if that's the greatest matchup coming up in the following week, but he has a 2 starts in the next week.
Too bad that Kodai Senga got injured for the Mets. It was looking up and up. Too bad. I'll add 3 more guys. Tyler Mahle, 30% owned. He looked okay-ish in his first start. Struck out just 5 innings. Only gave up 5 hits, 1 walk, and 1 run. His fastball looked about the same as it did last year in the about 92 miles an hour. Doesn't throw that hard. He's a dart. He's a high upside dart. If you're in a situation where, you're down and, you got to jump up to the pack, he's a guy that you could take a chance on. He's 2 start this week at Boston against Minnesota. So, you never know. It's a good dart. The other 2 guys I'll mention, Taijuan Walker plays versus Miami and versus Washington. Next week he gets at Kansas City. Taijuan Walker, he in a pinch can give you a couple of wins, goes 5 innings or whatever in Philadelphia. The good team, good run support. Taijuan Walker, if you want to get a couple of wins, a couple of Ks, there you go. And Marco Gonzalez, we've seen him in his career where he just slips under a 3 ERA, then he goes to a 4 ERA, then he goes to 3.5 ERA. Well, he's looking good this year, actually. And he's got 2 starts at San Diego and versus Seattle. He seemed to always do it, and he gives you innings. He's ramping up. Should be able to go 5-6 innings. Old dependable Marco Gonzalez. He's an option for streaming. All right. Injury update, Ruvain. What's going on?
Well, because we were so negative this week about all the giving up and everything like that, let me give some positive injury updates here. Mookie Betts, he's had the fractured left hand. He's expected to be activated off of the IL this week, but he's also expected to be batting second behind Shohei Ohtani. Max Muncy, yes, Max Muncy of the Dodgers, not the Athletics. Max Muncy is actually still in baseball. He's been out since mid-May with an oblique strain. He's finally beginning a rehab assignment, and barring any setbacks, he can be back by August 19th. Tommy Edman, who has not played yet this year. This is the 3rd Dodger on this list already. Tommy Edman, he continues to recover from wrist surgery. He is also beginning a rehab assignment this week. He'll need at least 1 week in the rehab assignment, then he can be called up. And let's go with another Dodger. Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He's on the IL with a right rotator cuff strain. He threw a 30-pitch bullpen session this week already, and he hopes to return either late August, early September. Another guy you should watch for who's coming back is Michael Harris. He's been coming back from a right hamstring strain. He's been out since June 14th. He began a rehab assignment. He could be activated as soon as next week. And by the way, just so you know, the Braves are out of a playoff spot for today after they lost today and the Mets won. They're out of a playoff spot for the first time since June 10th, 2022. Go figure that one out. Speaking of Mets and former Mets, Jacob deGrom, he continues to rehab following his second Tommy John surgery. He threw a live batting practice already. He should be able to throw one more sim game and then possibly go out on a rehab assignment and get going. And one more positive thing, Joe Musgrove, he should be activated possibly to start this weekend. He does have a bone spur in his pitching elbow. We'll see how that works out.
So the Braves, they've lost Acuna, Spencer Strider, Ozzy Albies. Yeah, I mean it's been rough for them. What do you want? What do you want them to do? You know.
Well, they've been holding. You know, they've been okay. I mean, they just DFA'd Eddie Rosario, and they tried to bring Jorge Soler back. They're trying to recreate their World Series run of a couple years ago, but it's not the same team. Charlie Morton's older. It's just not the same team.
Who would have picked the Braves in third place right now from the start of the season? Yikes! With the Mets over them, I'm not disappointed.
No, y'all are definitely not sad about that. But it's honestly, I give them credit. It's amazing that they have won as much as they have, considering they lost their number one pitcher, number one hitter, and now Albies basically out the rest of the season. Olsen going from his best season to maybe his worst. I mean, I'm not even sure how they're winning as much as they have, but it also, at this point, might be surprising if they do squeak into the playoffs, but we'll see.
Well, Albies actually, he may be coming back 2 to 3 weeks before the season ends, because I actually asked one of the beat reporters of the Braves why they didn't put him on the 60-day IL, because he was going to be out for 56 days. Why not put him in 60-day? They said they expect him to come back either the second or third week in September. So they're trying to get him back sooner than that. So, maybe they'll get some reinforcements, having Michael Harris come back, and then a couple weeks later, Ozzy Albies. Hopefully it won't be too little too late.
Yeah, Michael Harris. Look at that. I mean, that's a lot of talent to be on the shelf. It's really hard. I mean, the thing is that, when you stay healthy, that's when you do good. If your team is on the injured list, you're not going to do good. It's true in regular baseball. It's true in fantasy baseball. It's a crapshoot, guys. That's what it is. You got to roll with the punches. That's why we have the injury update, because you just got to know what to do and when and plan around. You might want to pick up some of these guys. Max Muncy, maybe he'll help you for the rest of the season. Pick him up now while he's available and stuff like that. Yep. All right. Well, that's the end of the show. A lot of good stuff today. We did some good player comparisons. We talked some ethics. We did some waiver wire picks. We had a lot of fun. So thank you so much, Pierre Camus, for coming on the show. Why don't you tell everybody what you're up to these days, where we can see your stuff, listen to you, and all things Pierre Camus.
All right. Well, always great being on here, having some good discussion. I'm full-time YouTube, basically, now. Gone from the writing, editing world to the video world. Go figure. But we have the Fantasy Endgame Baseball channel, dedicated YouTube channel just for fantasy baseball. And you can find it by going to YouTube and just searching Fantasy Endgame Baseball. Or if it's in the address bar, youtube.com/@Fantasy Endgame MLB. And if you type Fantasy Endgame, you'll also see there is a football channel, which, of course, is in full swing right now, too. So, yep, I'm a dual sport fantasy athlete, I guess you could call it that. But that's it. Videos coming out regularly. Got 4 videos and 2 live streams weekly for baseball and the football as well. So everyone give it a watch and let me know what you think.
Are you watching any of the Olympics, by the way?
Not really, like bits and pieces, highlights, I guess you could say. And of course, catching all the memes on Twitter. So that's the extent of my Olympic viewing. I watch the basketball and probably not much else, unfortunately.
Yeah, I watch the track and field. My dad was a big track and field. I mean, he still gets a track and field weekly. So we grew up. I went to a couple of meets when I was younger. I don't remember, but apparently, like Leroy Burrell broke a record or whatever. Or I grew up in that era, so we still watch the track and field. I mean, Usain Bolt in the last couple of Olympics. Wow, I mean that was that was something to behold. Not as excited this year, though. I am. I feel like I'm not. I'm watching a couple of the prime times, but I'm not as excited as I used to be. I don't know why. Ruvain, are you watching it all?
Not so much. I mean, the basketball just a little bit, and the drama of who's playing, who's not playing, with the time limit and stuff like that. But there's really nothing else that's really as compelling. I mean, the gymnastics is a little bit compelling to see how many medals the Americans will get, but otherwise, I mean, I watch just like I hate to say it, but I like watching the fails, of the Olympics because it makes me feel a little better about myself. But otherwise, there's really nothing. I mean, we're America is either it's a four sport country, and the other and all these Olympic sports where we don't really have that much into it or anything like that. So I don't think that's why people pay that much attention to it.
Well, in my house, we're doing the Cohen Olympics. We're having a whole month of sports games between me, my wife, my two sons. We're all playing different games, board games, just everything. We're just doing like a whole month of every day we're playing something. And we're each getting medals along the way. We're having fun with the Olympic idea and spirit, although I'm not watching much other than the races in prime time. Ruvain, what about you? What's going on?
You can follow me on Twitter, X, at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come. And you can catch my weekly article on Rotoballer discussing all the injuries I mentioned today, as well as many more.
All right, I'm Ariel Cohen. You can see my stuff over at Fangraphs, over at Rotoballer. ATC projections are now updated with the rates on Fangraphs. We'll have one more update in the first or second week of September, and that'll be it for the year. Playing time updates every single night, so obviously you can still track it, and it will go and calculate for the rest of the season. So check it out. On Twitter, X, I am at ATCNY, and of course, you can listen to the Beat the Shift podcast each and every week. We'll be going pretty much till the end of the season, probably stop two weeks or so before the end of the season, and we will go there. All right. Once again, thank you so much to our guest, Pierre Camus, for joining us on the show, and from all of us here at Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.